The emergency beacon lit up Taeyang's console at 3 in the morning. He sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes as the harsh beeping filled his small quarters. Another crash. That made it the third one this year, though the previous two had been cargo haulers with nothing more than bumps and bruises to show for it. He pulled on his jacket and grabbed his medical kit. The location marker showed the crash site was about 5 kilometers into the forest, past the mining sector. Taeyang climbed into his transport vehicle and started the engine. The colony of Verdun 7 was still asleep around him, just a collection of prefabricated buildings and dome structures scattered across the valley. 300 people called this place home, and Taeyang had treated most of them at least once. The drive through the forest was bumpy. His headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating tall trees with purple leaves that swayed in the night wind. Verdun 7 was a peaceful world, far from any major shipping lanes or conflict zones. That was exactly why Taeyang had chosen it 3 years ago. After everything he had seen during his time with the Medical Corps, he wanted quiet. He wanted simple. The crash site appeared suddenly. Trees were knocked down in a straight line, carved through like someone had dragged a blade across the landscape. At the end of the destruction sat a small ship, maybe twice the size of his transport. It was partially embedded in the ground, smoke rising from its damaged hull. The design was strange, with smooth curves and a metallic surface that seemed to shift colors in his headlights. Taeyang approached carefully. He had seen enough crashed ships to know they could be dangerous. Fuel leaks, unstable reactors, sometimes even automated defense systems still active and confused. He pulled out his scanner and checked for radiation. The readings were normal, though there was an unusual energy signature he did not recognize. The ship's hull had a large crack along the side. Taeyang squeezed through, his flashlight beam cutting through the smoke-filled interior. The inside was just as strange as the outside. The controls looked organic somehow, like they had grown rather than been built. Everything was covered in a thin layer of what looked like frost. Then he saw her. She was lying near what must have been the pilot's seat, her body twisted at an angle that made Taeyang wince. He rushed forward, his medical training taking over. His first concern was whether she was even alive. He pressed 2 fingers against her neck, searching for a pulse. Her skin was cold, much colder than it should be, and it had an unusual texture, smooth like polished stone. But there was a pulse, faint and slow. Taeyang pulled out his medical scanner and ran it over her body. The readings were confusing. Her biology was completely alien to him, but the scanner could still detect major trauma. Burns covered her left side, deep lacerations across her torso, and what looked like energy weapon damage on her shoulder. She needed help immediately. He looked at her face. She was beautiful in a strange, otherworldly way. Her skin was a pale violet color and her hair was pure silver, long and tangled around her shoulders. She had markings on her arms and neck like tattoos, but they seemed to shimmer slightly even in the dim light. Her clothing was torn and burnt, but he could see it was made from material far more advanced than anything the colony had. Taeyang made a decision. He could not treat her here. The ship was too dangerous and he needed his full medical equipment. He carefully lifted her, surprised at how light she was despite her height. She was tall, taller than him, with a lean but muscular build. As he carried her out of the ship, he noticed details he had missed before. Her hands had 6 fingers instead of 5, and her nails were black and looked sharp. The drive back to his clinic was tense. He kept checking her vital signs, worried she would not make it. Whoever she was, whatever she was someone's daughter, maybe someone's friend. That was enough for Taeyang. He had sworn an oath to help anyone who needed it, and he meant it. His clinic was on the edge of the colony, a small building with 4 beds and basic surgical equipment. It was not much, but it was enough for the colony's needs. Taeyang carried her inside and laid her on his examination table. He turned on all the lights and got to work. The next few hours were a blur. He cleaned and dressed her wounds using techniques he had learned years ago. Her biology was different, but trauma was trauma. Burns needed cooling, lacerations needed sealing, and broken bones needed setting. He worked carefully, methodically, doing everything he could to stabilize her condition. As dawn light started filtering through the windows, Taeyang finally stepped back. She was stable now, her breathing more regular. He had done all he could. Now it was up to her body to do the rest. He covered her with a thermal blanket and sat down in his chair, suddenly exhausted. He looked at her sleeping face. Who was she? Where had she come from? And more importantly, why had she crashed here? Verdun 7 was not on any major routes. Ships did not just accidentally end up here. But those were questions for later. Right now she needed rest, and frankly, so did he. Taeyang stood up and walked to his small office. He knew he should report this to the colony administrator, but something stopped him. If he reported an alien crash, there would be questions, investigations, maybe even military involvement. The colony would panic, and this woman, whoever she was, deserved a chance to recover before facing all of that. He made another decision. He would keep her presence quiet for now, just until she woke up and he could talk to her, understand her situation. Ferdinand 7 was isolated enough that he could get away with it for a few days at least. Taeyang returned to the examination room and set up a monitoring system. If her condition changed, alarms would wake him. He pulled a cot next to the examination table and laid down. Within minutes, exhaustion pulled him into sleep. He did not know that the woman he had just saved was the most powerful individual in the known galaxy. He did not know that her disappearance had thrown dozens of star systems into chaos. He did not know that by saving her life, he had just changed the course of galactic history. All he knew was that someone needed help and he had given it. For Taeyang, that was enough. That was everything. The alien woman woke up on the third day. Taeyang was checking her vital signs when her eyes suddenly opened. They were striking, a deep amber color that seemed to glow slightly in the dim light of the clinic. For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then she tried to sit up quickly, wincing as pain shot through her injured body. Taeyang raised his hands in a calming gesture. He spoke slowly and clearly, even though he knew she probably could not understand him. His words did not matter as much as his tone. He kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. He pointed to her bandages, then to himself, trying to communicate that he was a doctor, that he had helped her. She studied him with those intense amber eyes. Her gaze was unlike anything Taeyang had experienced before. It was not hostile, but it was penetrating, as if she was analyzing every detail about him. After a long moment, she seemed to relax slightly. She laid back down, though her body remained tense, ready to move if needed. Over the next hour, they established a basic form of communication. She pointed to herself and made a sound that approximated to Nari. Taeyang was pretty sure it was not her real name, or at least not her full name, but he accepted it. He pointed to himself and said his name. She repeated it, her accent making it sound slightly different but recognizable. Taeyang showed her his medical equipment, explaining what each item was for through gestures and simple demonstrations. She watched everything with careful attention. When he needed to change her bandages, he asked permission first through gestures. She nodded, and he noticed something strange. The wounds he had treated 3 days ago were already healing at an incredible rate. The burns on her side had faded to light marks, and the deep lacerations were now thin lines. He had never seen anything heal that fast. Even with advanced medical technology, this kind of recovery should take weeks, not days. Nari noticed his surprise. She looked at her own wounds, then back at him. She made a gesture he interpreted as normal, as if to say this was not unusual for her species. Days passed and Nari grew stronger. She started sitting up, then standing, then walking around the small clinic. Taeyang brought her food, trying different things to see what she could eat. She seemed able to digest most human food, though she preferred protein-heavy meals. She ate with precise, controlled movements, nothing wasted. What fascinated Taeyang most was how she carried herself. Even injured, even in an unfamiliar place, there was something regal about her. She moved with absolute confidence, and there was a certain intensity in everything she did. When she looked at something, she really looked at it, studying it completely. When she listened to him speak, even though she did not understand most words, she gave him her full attention. As the days went on, Nari started learning his language. She learned fast, picking up words with just a few repetitions. Within a week, they could have basic conversations. Her voice was pleasant with a musical quality to it, though it could turn sharp and commanding when she was frustrated with her language mistakes. Taeyang found himself talking to her about all sorts of things. He told her about Verdun 7, about the colony and its people. He told her about Earth, humanity's homeworld, and its long history of conflicts and eventual unity. He explained why he became a medic, how he had seen too much death and wanted to focus on saving lives instead. Nari listened to everything with deep interest. She asked questions about human culture, about their concepts of honor and duty, about how they treated those weaker than themselves. Her questions were specific and thoughtful. When Taeyang explained that humans generally tried to help those in need, she seemed genuinely surprised. One evening, as Taeyang was preparing dinner for both of them, Nari spoke quietly from her bed. Her language skills had improved dramatically. She told him that in her experience, most species viewed weakness as something to exploit. The strong dominated the weak. That was the natural order. The fact that he had saved her life without knowing who she was, without asking for payment or favor, was strange to her. Taeyang turned from the small cooking unit and looked at her. He explained that helping people was not about what you could get from them. It was about recognizing that everyone had value, that everyone deserved dignity and care. He admitted that humans were not perfect at this, that they had a long history of failing to live up to these ideals. But they kept trying. Nari did not respond, but Taeyang saw something shift in her expression. It was subtle, but it was there. A crack in her armor, perhaps. A moment of genuine curiosity about these strange humans and their even stranger values. Taeyang had to make supply runs into the main colony settlement every few days. He tried to go in the early morning when fewer people were around. He did not want to answer questions about why he needed extra food and medical supplies. His friend Minho, who ran the colony's engineering shop, noticed anyway. Minho was sharp. He had been on Verdun 7 since the colony was founded, and he knew everyone and everything that happened. When Taeyang came in for the third time in 2 weeks buying double his usual supplies, Minho cornered him. Taeyang tried to deflect, but Minho was persistent. Finally, he admitted he was treating a patient who needed privacy. Minho wanted to know more, but Taeyang refused to give details. They argued briefly, with Minho warning that secrets in a small colony had a way of causing problems. But Taeyang stood firm. His patient deserved privacy and protection. It was during one of these supply runs that Taeyang first heard the news. The colony's main communication center had picked up unusual chatter from nearby systems. Several border colonies had gone dark with no explanation. There were rumors of military movements, of the Vex Dominion mobilizing its war fleets. The Dominion was known across the galaxy for its aggressive expansion policies. But the strangest rumor was that the Dominion's massive offensive had suddenly stopped. Their fleets had been pushing into new territories, crushing any resistance, and then, without warning, they had halted all operations. Some people thought it was a strategic pause. Others wondered if something had gone wrong. No one had any real answers. Taeyang thought about Nari's ship, damaged by what looked like weapons fire. He thought about how far from any normal route Verdun 7 was. He thought about her unusual biology, her rapid healing, the advanced technology of her ship. Who was she running from? Or maybe more accurately, who was running from her? When he returned to the clinic, Nari was standing by the window looking out at the colony. She had recovered enough to move around freely now. The bandages were gone, replaced by clothing Taeyang had borrowed without explaining exactly why he needed women's clothes from the colony's supply center. She turned when he entered. Without preamble, she asked him if he had heard any news. Her tone was careful, controlled. Taeyang told her about the rumors about the Dominion's movements and their strange halt. He watched her face, looking for any reaction. Nari was silent for a long moment. Then she said something that chilled him. She said that she was a soldier, that she had been in a battle when her ship was damaged, that she had escaped and ended up here by accident. She did not offer more details, and Taeyang did not push, but he wondered. A soldier from where? Fighting in what war? And why did he get the feeling that she was not telling him everything? That night, Taeyang lay awake in his quarters while Nari rested in the clinic's patient room. He had questions he was afraid to ask. He had a patient who was rapidly becoming a friend, but who remained a mystery. And somewhere out in the galaxy, events were unfolding that he did not understand, but that felt connected to the woman sleeping in his clinic. Outside, the stars of Verdun 7's night sky shone bright and cold. Somewhere among those stars, people were searching, and eventually they would find what they were looking for. 2 weeks after the crash, Nari was almost completely healed. The transformation was remarkable. Where there had been burns and wounds, her violet skin was now smooth and unmarked. She moved with a fluid grace that reminded Taeyang of trained dancers or martial artists. But there was something more, something that suggested she was dangerous in ways he could not quite define. They had fallen into a routine. Mornings, Taeyang would prepare breakfast while Nari performed what looked like combat exercises in the clinic's small open space. Her movements were precise and controlled, a series of forms that flowed from one to the next. She never asked permission to use the space. She simply did it, as if the concept that someone might object never occurred to her. After breakfast, they would talk. Nari's grasp of his language improved daily. She was now speaking in full sentences with only occasional mistakes. She asked him endless questions about Earth and humanity. She wanted to know about their wars, their governments, their art and culture. But mostly she asked about their values. She seemed particularly fascinated by human concepts of fairness and justice. When Taeyang explained that humans believed all people had certain basic rights regardless of their strength or status, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said that where she came from, strength was the only right that mattered. The strong ruled and the weak served. That was the natural order of things. Taeyang asked her if she believed that. She looked at him with those amber eyes and said she used to. Now she was not so sure. It was during one of their conversations that Taeyang told her about his time in the medical corps. He had served on a military hospital ship during one of humanity's border conflicts. He had seen young soldiers, barely adults, brought in with terrible injuries. He had saved some and lost others. The experience had changed him. He had realized that he did not want to be part of the cycle of violence, even as someone trying to heal its wounds. He wanted to help people in a place where violence was not the answer to every problem. Nari listened without interruption. When he finished, she asked a simple question. Did he regret leaving? Did he wish he could do more, save more people? Taeyang thought about it. He told her that he used to feel guilty, like he was abandoning people who needed him. But he had learned that you cannot save everyone, and burning yourself out trying would only mean you could not save anyone. Sometimes choosing to live a small, good life was enough. Something shifted in Nari's expression. For the first time since he had met her, she looked vulnerable. She said quietly that she had never considered that option, that she had responsibilities that would not allow her to simply walk away. Before Taeyang could ask what she meant, his communicator beeped. It was Minho, asking him to come to the engineering shop. There was something he needed to see. Taeyang told Nari he had to go out for a bit. She nodded, but there was a tension in her posture that had not been there before. He reassured her that everything was fine, but he felt uneasy as he left the clinic. The engineering shop was on the other side of the colony. Minho met him at the door with a grim expression. Inside, he pulled up a holographic display showing a news feed from the Galactic network. The images showed military ships, thousands of them, all bearing the marks of different governments and factions. Minho explained that something unprecedented was happening. Every major power in the galaxy was mobilizing. The official story was about increased piracy and the need for security, but no one believed that. The timing was too coordinated. Something else was going on. More disturbing were the rumors spreading through back channels. Word was that someone important had gone missing. Someone so important that their disappearance had caused this galaxy-wide panic. But no one knew who or even what species they were from. Information was being locked down hard. Taeyang felt cold dread settle in his stomach. He thought about Nari, about her advanced ship, her strange biology, her rapid healing, the way she carried herself like she expected people to obey her. He thought about the weapons damage on her ship and the fact that she had ended up on a planet so far from any normal route that it could only have been intentional. Minho was watching him carefully. He asked Taeyang directly if his mysterious patient had anything to do with this. Taeyang wanted to say no to protect Nari's secret, but his face must have given something away. Minho cursed quietly. They argued then. Minho said that harboring whoever Nari really was could bring danger to the entire colony. 300 innocent people who had no part in any of this. Taeyang insisted that Nari had not done anything wrong, that she was just someone who needed help. Minho asked how he could possibly know that, and Taeyang realized he could not answer. The argument ended with Minho giving Taeyang an ultimatum. He had 1 week to get his patient off for Dan 7, or Minho would report the situation to the colony administrator. Taeyang left the engineering shop feeling like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. When he returned to the clinic, Nari was waiting by the door. She looked at his face and asked what was wrong. Taeyang told her everything. About the military mobilization, about the rumors, about Minho's suspicions and his ultimatum. Nari was quiet for a long time. Then she said something that surprised him. She said she would leave, that she had put him and his colony in danger by staying, and she would not let him suffer consequences for his kindness. But Taeyang shook his head. He told her that she was still not fully recovered, that leaving now would be dangerous. More than that, she had nowhere to go. Her ship was destroyed. Until they figured out a solution, she was staying. Nari looked at him with an expression he could not read. She asked why he would risk so much for her. He was just one person and his colony was small and vulnerable. If the wrong people came looking for her, he and everyone he knew could be hurt or killed. Why would he accept that risk? Taeyang sat down heavily. He thought about his answer carefully. Finally, he said that turning away someone in need was a line he would not cross. That the moment you started making calculations about who deserved help and who did not, you stopped being the person you wanted to be. It might not be smart or practical, but it was who he was. For the first time, Nari smiled. It was a small smile, sad and wondering at the same time. She told him that he was either the bravest or the most foolish person she had ever met. Perhaps both. The next few days were tense. Taeyang kept checking the news feeds, looking for any sign that someone was getting closer. He started making plans for what they would do if someone came looking. The abandoned mining outpost in the mountains could serve as a hiding place if needed. It was isolated and still had some functional equipment. He shared these plans with Nari. She listened but told him it would not work. If people were truly looking for her, they would find her eventually. No hiding place on a colony world would be sufficient, but she appreciated the thought. They spent their evenings talking more. Nari told him carefully edited stories about her life, about battles she had fought and places she had seen. Taeyang got the impression of someone who had spent their entire existence at war, who knew nothing but conflict and command. He asked her what she wanted. If she could choose any life, what would it be? Nari was silent for so long he thought she would not answer. Then she said something that broke his heart. She said she did not know how to want things. She only knew how to do her duty. Taeyang told her that maybe it was time she learned. On the 6th day after his argument with Minho, Taeyang was woken by proximity alarms. Ships were entering Verdun 7's orbit. Multiple ships, military configuration. He rushed to his communicator and pulled up the sensor data. His blood ran cold. These were not explorers or traders. These were warships. He ran to the clinic. Nari was already awake, standing by the window and looking up at the sky even though it was still dark. She turned to him and spoke calmly. She said they had found her, and now everything was about to change. The Vex Dominion ships hung in orbit like predators circling prey. Taeyang watched through his clinic window as landing craft began descending toward the colony. The morning sun caught their metallic hulls, making them shine like falling stars. But there was nothing beautiful about what was coming. The colony's emergency sirens wailed to life. People stumbled out of their homes, confused and frightened. Verdun 7 had never experienced anything like this. They were farmers and miners, engineers and teachers. They had no defenses, no weapons capable of fighting military forces. They were utterly helpless. Taeyang turned to Nari. She stood perfectly still, her face showing no emotion. But he had spent enough time with her to notice the small signs. The way her hands flexed slightly. The subtle shift in her stance. She was preparing for violence. He grabbed her arm. His voice was urgent. He told her that if she revealed herself, people would die. The Dominion would not hesitate to destroy the colony if they thought it necessary. Their only chance was to stay hidden and hope the soldiers left without finding her. Nari looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. She said she would hide, but only if he promised to stay safe. If the situation became too dangerous, he should tell them everything. Her life was not worth the lives of innocents. Taeyang wanted to argue, but there was no time. He quickly led her to a hidden storage area beneath the clinic, a small space meant for emergency supplies. She climbed down without complaint. Before he closed the hatch, their eyes met. He promised her it would be okay. He was not sure either of them believed it. The Dominion soldiers arrived within the hour. They came in full combat gear, weapons ready, moving with the efficiency of trained killers. The colony administrator, an older woman named Administrator Somin, tried to meet them peacefully. They pushed past her without a word. The commanding officer was a woman who introduced herself as Commander Hyon. She was tall and lean, with sharp features and eyes that missed nothing. She wore the black and silver uniform of the Dominion's elite forces. When she spoke, her voice carried absolute authority. Commander Hyon gathered the colonists in the main square. Taeyang stood among them, trying to look calm while his heart pounded. Hyon explained that they were searching for a dangerous fugitive, a war criminal who had destroyed one of their battle cruisers and killed thousands of Dominion citizens. They had reason to believe this criminal had crashed on Verdun 7. The colonists murmured in fear. A few looked around nervously as if expecting a monster to appear. Hyun continued. She said that anyone harboring this criminal would be considered an enemy of the Dominion, but anyone who provided information would be rewarded generously. Taeyang felt sick. The way Hyun described it, Nari sounded like a mass murderer, but he remembered the person he had come to know. Someone who asked thoughtful questions, someone who seemed genuinely interested in understanding human values, someone who smiled sadly when talking about duty and sacrifice. Could both things be true? The soldiers began searching the colony systematically. They scanned every building, every vehicle, every piece of equipment. They questioned everyone, asking about crashed ships, unusual activity, strangers. The colonists cooperated out of fear, giving them whatever information they could. When the soldiers reached Taeyang's clinic, he forced himself to stay calm. They entered without asking permission, their scanners sweeping every corner. The lead soldier, a young man with cold eyes, asked Taeyang what he did. Taeyang explained he was the colony's doctor. The soldier looked around at the medical equipment. He noted that some of it seemed recently used, more than would be normal for a small colony. Taeyang explained that there had been several mining accidents recently. It was a lie, but a believable one. The soldier was not satisfied. He pulled out a more advanced scanner and began checking for biological traces. Taeyang felt sweat forming on his back. Nari had been living here for weeks. There would be traces of her everywhere. Her DNA on surfaces, in the air filtration system, on the medical equipment. The scanner beeped. The soldier frowned and adjusted the settings. He told Taeyang that his equipment was detecting an unknown biological signature. Taeyang tried to deflect, saying that treating various alien species meant his clinic would have all sorts of biological traces. But his voice shook slightly. The soldier called for Commander Hyun. She arrived quickly, her expression intent. She took the scanner from the soldier and examined the readings herself. Then she looked directly at Taeyang. Her gaze was like being dissected. She asked him a simple question. Had he treated anyone unusual in the past few weeks? Taeyang wanted to lie. Every instinct screamed at him to protect his patient. But he also thought about the 300 people in this colony. Children, families, elderly people who had come here for peace. If he lied and they found out, Hyun might decide to make an example of the entire colony. He made a choice. He told the truth, but not all of it. He admitted that he had treated an injured alien from a crash site, but he said she had died 3 days ago from her injuries. He had buried her in the forest. It was a medical failure he had not wanted to report. Hyun studied him carefully. She asked where exactly he had buried the body. Taeyang gave her false coordinates, deep in the forest where it would take hours to search. Hyun ordered 2 soldiers to go check. Then she told everyone else to continue searching. But she stayed in the clinic. She walked slowly around the space, examining everything. She picked up medical instruments, looked at his supplies, studied his equipment. Taeyang stood nervously, trying not to show his fear. Finally, Hyun sat down in his office chair. She told the other soldiers to wait outside. Once they were alone, she spoke in a different tone. Less commander, more person. She told Taeyang that she could see he was lying. She had interrogated hundreds of people and she knew the signs. But she also recognized something else in him. Conviction. He believed he was doing the right thing. Hyun leaned forward. She told him a story. 2 months ago, a single ship had attacked a Dominion battle fleet. 1 ship against 40. It should have been suicide. Instead, that 1 ship had destroyed a battlecruiser, damaged 6 other capital ships, and escaped. Over 3,000 Dominion personnel had died. The attack had been unprovoked, she said. They had been on a peaceful patrol when suddenly they were fighting for their lives against an enemy of unimaginable power. The pilot of that ship was a monster who killed without mercy or hesitation. She looked at Taeyang with something almost like pity. She told him that she understood wanting to help people. But sometimes the person you were helping was not who you thought they were. Sometimes monsters could seem human, or in this case could seem worth saving. Taeyang listened to everything. Then he asked a question. He asked if her fleet had attacked first. If maybe this mysterious pilot had been defending themselves. Hyun's expression hardened. She said that even if that were true, which she did not believe, the response was completely disproportionate. You do not murder thousands of people in self-defense. You disable their weapons, you escape. You do not turn war machines into coffins. She stood up and walked to the window. She said she would give Taeyang 1 chance. Tell her where the fugitive was hiding and she would make sure no harm came to him or his colony. Stay silent. and when they inevitably found their target, everyone here would be considered accomplices. Taeyang thought about Nari hiding beneath his feet. He thought about the colony, about Minho and Administrator Somin and all the people who trusted him. He thought about his oath to do no harm. He told Commander Hyan that he had told her the truth. The person he had treated was dead. Hyun sighed. She said that was unfortunate. She walked to the door, then paused. Without turning around, she told him that the person he was protecting had killed thousands. If more people died because of his choice today, those deaths would be on his conscience. Then she left. Taeyang stood alone in his clinic for a long moment. Then he locked the door and opened the hidden hatch. Nari climbed out slowly. She had heard everything through the thin floor. She looked at him with an expression he had never seen before, something between gratitude and pain. She asked him why. Why had he protected her after hearing what Hyun said? How could he be sure Hyun was lying? Taeyang sat down heavily. He admitted that he could not be sure, that maybe everything Hyun said was true, but he had made a promise to protect his patient. And more than that, he believed in giving people a chance to tell their side of the story. He asked Nari directly, "Did she attack that fleet? Did she kill all those people?" Nari was quiet for a very long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft but steady. She said yes. She had done exactly what Hyun described. She had destroyed that ship and killed everyone aboard. Taeyang felt like he had been punched in the gut. But before he could respond, Nari continued. She told him why. Nari spoke carefully, choosing each word with precision. She told Taeyang that the Dominion fleet had not been on a peaceful patrol. They had been invading her territory, pushing into space that belonged to her people. When she had ordered them to leave, they had opened fire first. Everything that followed was a response to their aggression. Taeyang listened, trying to process this new information. He asked her what she meant by her territory, her people. Who exactly was she? Before Nari could answer, alarms started blaring outside. Taeyang ran to the window and saw Dominion soldiers rushing toward the forest. Something had happened. The soldiers who went to check his false burial site must have reported back that there was nothing there. Commander Hyan would know he had lied. She would tear the colony apart looking for Nari. They had minutes at most. Taeyang turned to Nari with desperate urgency. He told her about the abandoned mining outpost in the mountains. It was their only chance. They had to move now. But Nari shook her head slowly. She said running would only delay the inevitable. The Dominion would never stop searching, and eventually innocents would be hurt. She walked to the clinic door and placed her hand on it. She told Taeyang that he had given her something precious. 3 weeks of peace. 3 weeks of seeing how people could live without constant war and domination. 3 weeks of being treated as a person rather than a weapon or a threat. She would be grateful for that for the rest of her life, however long that might be. Then she opened the door and stepped outside. Taeyang grabbed her arm, trying to pull her back, but she was far stronger than she looked. She gently but firmly removed his hand. She told him to stay inside. What was about to happen was not something he should see. But Taeyang followed her anyway. He had made it this far. He was not going to abandon her now. Nari walked calmly toward the center of the colony where Dominion soldiers were gathering. The colonists had been herded into their homes, doors sealed. Commander Hyan stood in the square, surrounded by her troops. When she saw Nari approaching, her expression changed from frustration to shock. Hyun barked orders. Soldiers raised their weapons, forming a perimeter around Nari. There were at least 50 armed troops, all with weapons trained on her. Hyun stepped forward, her own weapon drawn. She demanded that Nari surrender immediately. Nari stopped walking. She stood alone in the center of the square, surrounded by weapons and hostile forces. She looked small and vulnerable. Then she spoke, and her voice carried across the entire colony with unnatural clarity. She told Hyan that she would surrender on one condition. The colony and everyone in it would be left unharmed. They had no knowledge of who she was. The doctor who had treated her was simply doing his duty as a healer. No one here was responsible for anything. Hyun considered this. She said the Dominion was not unreasonable. If Nari came quietly, there would be no need for violence against the colonists. She gave her word as a commander. Nari nodded. She started walking toward Hyan, her hands visible and empty. The soldiers tensed but held their fire. Everything seemed to be ending peacefully. Then one of the soldiers made a mistake. Perhaps he was nervous. Perhaps he was eager. But he fired his weapon. The energy bolt shot toward Nari at incredible speed. Taeyang shouted a warning, but there was no time. The bolt should have hit her directly in the chest. Instead, Nari moved. She moved faster than anything human, faster than should have been possible. One moment she was walking slowly, the next she was 3 meters to the side. The energy bolt hit the ground where she had been, leaving a smoking crater. More shots rang out. The nervous soldier had broken the tension, and now others were firing. Dozens of energy bolts filled the air, all converging on where Nari stood. She did not try to dodge. Instead, something incredible happened. Silver light erupted from Nari's body. Her skin began to glow with an internal radiance. The markings on her arms and neck that Taeyang had thought were tattoos blazed with power. Energy shields materialized around her, deflecting the weapon's fire as if it were rain. Then weapons appeared in her hands. They materialized from nothing. Complex devices that looked organic and technological at the same time. She moved through the Dominion soldiers like a storm-given form. Her weapons cut through their armor. Her movements were too fast to follow. In seconds, a dozen soldiers were down. Commander Hyun shouted for everyone to fall back. She screamed into her communicator for orbital support. Her voice was no longer calm and controlled. It was filled with fear. More soldiers emerged from buildings trying to establish defensive positions. They used heavy weapons, the kind meant for destroying armored vehicles. The weapons' fire was intense enough to level buildings. But Nari moved through it all untouchable. Taeyang watched in horror and awe. This was not a soldier. This was something far beyond that. Every movement Nari made was perfect, economical, devastating. She was not fighting like someone trying to survive. She was fighting like someone who had already won and was simply going through the motions. And yet he noticed something crucial. She was not killing. Her strikes were precise, targeting weapons and armor, disabling rather than murdering. When soldiers fell, they were unconscious or wounded, but alive. She could have killed them all in seconds, but she was choosing not to. Ships began descending from orbit. Reinforcements were arriving, along with heavier weapons platforms. The Dominion was bringing its full force to bear. The colony was about to become a battlefield. Nari looked up at the descending ships. Then she did something that made Taeyang's blood run cold. She rose into the air. No vehicle, no visible propulsion system. She simply flew upward, accelerating toward the incoming ships. The battle moved into the sky. Energy weapons lit up the afternoon like a second sun. Explosions echoed across the valley. Ships tried to target her, but she was too small, too fast, too precise. One by one, she disabled them, sending them spinning back toward orbit with their engines damaged and weapons destroyed. On the ground, Commander Hyun was shouting into her communicator. Taeyang was close enough to hear. She was calling for retreat. She was ordering all Dominion forces to pull back immediately. And she was using a title, a name that made Taeyang's world spin. She was calling Nari Empress Hana. The Dominion ships retreated in disarray. Nari, or rather Empress Hana, descended slowly back to the colony square. The silver light was fading from her skin, and the weapons in her hands dissolved into nothing. She looked exactly as she had before, calm and controlled. Commander Hyun remained, though her troops had fallen back. She stood at attention, her weapon lowered. When Hana touched down, Hyun dropped to one knee. She spoke formally, using titles and honorifics. She apologized for the attack. She explained that her forces had not known Hana's identity, that they believed they were pursuing a criminal. She begged forgiveness for the offense against the Starborn throne. Taeyang felt like he was in a dream. The woman he had been treating, the woman he had been eating breakfast with and teaching human customs to, was apparently an empress. And not just any empress. The commander of the Vex Dominion, one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy, was kneeling before her in terror. Hana spoke coolly. She told Hyun that the attack on her ship had been unprovoked, that Dominion forces had entered Starborn space without permission and had opened fire when challenged, that their casualties were the result of their own aggression. Hyun kept her head bowed. She said that she understood, that there had clearly been a terrible mistake at the command level, that the Dominion would investigate and make amends. Hana accepted this. She ordered Hyun to leave Verdun 7 immediately and to carry a message back to the Dominion leadership. If they ever attacked her people again, there would be no survivors. Not one. Hyun agreed quickly and retreated to her shuttle. Within minutes, all Dominion forces had withdrawn. The ships in orbit jumped to faster-than-light travel, fleeing as fast as their engines could carry them. The colony was silent. People emerged from their homes slowly, staring at the destruction in the square, at the damaged buildings, at the figure standing calmly in the center of it all. Hana turned and looked directly at Taeyang. She walked toward him and he saw something in her eyes. Apology, sadness, and resignation. She told him she was sorry. Sorry for lying. Sorry for bringing danger to his home. Sorry for letting him see what she really was. She said she had enjoyed their conversations, their quiet mornings, the glimpse of a life she could never have. But now he knew the truth. She was not someone who could be saved. She was someone the galaxy feared. Before Taeyang could respond, the sky lit up again. But this time it was not weapons fire. Ships were arriving, hundreds of them, all bearing the same markings. Beautiful ships with hulls that seemed to shimmer and shift colors like Hana's skin. The Starborn fleet had arrived, and they had come for their Empress. The Starborn fleet filled the sky above Verdun 7. There were so many ships that they blocked out portions of the sun, casting strange, shifting shadows across the colony. Each vessel was a work of art, elegant and deadly in equal measure. Compared to the crude military ships of the Dominion, they looked like the difference between a sword and a club. A single ship descended, larger than the others but still smaller than a typical warship. It landed in the colony square with no sound, no thrust from engines, just a smooth, graceful descent, as if gravity had politely moved aside. A ramp extended, and figures emerged. They were Starborn, the same species as Hana. All of them moved with that same fluid grace, that same sense of absolute confidence. But the one leading them was different. She was older, with silver hair that had strands of white running through it, and her markings were more elaborate. She wore armor that seemed to be made of living metal, constantly shifting and adjusting. This woman strode directly toward Hana. Her face was a mask of fury barely held in check. When she reached Hana, she stopped and spoke in a language Taeyang did not understand. But he did not need to understand the words to grasp the meaning. She was angry, terrified and angry in equal measure. Hana responded calmly in the same language. The woman's fury seemed to crack slightly, and she pulled Hana into an embrace that looked like it might break bones. Hana returned the embrace, and for a moment she looked almost vulnerable. When they separated, the woman turned her attention to the colony. Her eyes swept across the damaged buildings, the frightened colonists, and finally settled on Taeyang. Those eyes were cold and calculating. She said something to Hana, gesturing toward him. Hana shook her head and responded firmly. The woman's expression hardened, but she nodded curtly. She turned and barked orders to the other Starborn. They moved with military precision, spreading out across the colony, but they were not attacking. They were scanning, recording, analyzing. Hana walked over to Taeyang. She looked tired in a way he had not seen before. She introduced the other woman as Admiral Jiwon, her second-in-command and oldest friend. She explained that Jiwon was not happy about the situation. That was an understatement. Admiral Jiwon approached them, and Taeyang could feel the weight of her displeasure like a physical force. She looked at him the way someone might look at an insect that had somehow ended up somewhere it did not belong. She spoke in Taeyang's language, though her accent was much heavier than Hana's. She demanded to know what he had done to the Empress, what leverage he had used, what tricks he had employed to keep her hidden. The idea that the most powerful being in the galaxy would willingly hide with a primitive human medic was clearly impossible in her mind. Taeyang was too exhausted and shocked to be intimidated. He told her the simple truth. He had found an injured person and treated her injuries. That was all. He had not known who she was. He had not asked for anything. He was just doing his job. Jiwon did not believe him. She turned to Hana, speaking rapidly in their own language. Hana responded with equal force, her voice taking on that commanding tone Taeyang had heard when she spoke to Commander Hyun. Jiwon looked shocked, then angry, then finally resigned. She gave Taeyang one more suspicious look before walking away to oversee her troops. Hana sighed. She explained that Jiwon thought Taeyang must have manipulated her somehow. The concept that Hana would accept help from a stranger, that she would hide rather than call for her fleet, that she would risk her life and the stability of the entire Starborn ascendancy for 3 weeks of peace, was incomprehensible to her. Taeyang asked if that was so strange. Hana looked at him with those amber eyes and said yes. For someone like her, someone who commanded entire star systems and whose death could trigger wars across the galaxy, personal desires were not allowed. Every choice she made affected billions of lives. Freedom was a luxury she could not afford. Over the next hours, the starborn forces worked with incredible efficiency. They repaired the damage from the battle, using technology that seemed like magic. Buildings that had been partially destroyed were restored perfectly. Craters in the ground were filled and smoothed. Within 4 hours, there was no physical evidence that a battle had ever occurred. The colonists were treated with distant politeness. Starborn medics treated anyone who had been injured or traumatized. Starborn engineers upgraded the colony's infrastructure, fixing problems that had existed for years. It was clear they were making amends, though none of them explained why or asked if it was wanted. Administrator Soman tried to speak with Admiral Jiwon to understand what was happening. Jiwon explained briefly that their Empress had been recovering on this world. The Dominion attack was an insult to the Starborn ascendancy, and reparations would be paid. The colony would be placed under Starborn protection. Anyone who had helped the Empress would be rewarded. Soman was smart enough to understand what was not being said. The colony had not asked to be involved in galactic politics, but now they were. They would accept Starborn protection because refusing would be seen as an insult. They would accept the upgrades and repairs because it was compensation for the danger they had been exposed to. They had no choice in any of it. Minho found Taeyang as the sun was setting. The engineer looked at his friend with a mixture of concern and disbelief. He asked if it was true, if Taeyang had really been hiding the Starborn Empress in his clinic. Taeyang confirmed it, and Minho laughed. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of someone who had just realized how close they had all come to being caught in the middle of a galactic war. That evening, Hana came to the clinic one last time. She was alone, having left her guards outside. She looked around at the small space that had been her home for 3 weeks. She touched the examination table where Taeyang had first treated her. She stood by the window where she had looked out at the colony each morning. Finally, she turned to Taeyang. She told him that she had to leave. Her people needed her. The Dominion incident had destabilized several border regions, and her presence was required to maintain peace. But before she left, she wanted to offer him something. She offered him a position as her personal physician. She explained that the Starborn Empress had advisors, generals, scientists, all the resources of an advanced civilization. But she had never had someone who treated her as just a person. Someone who helped without expecting anything in return. Someone who reminded her that there was more to life than duty and warfare. The offer came with incredible benefits. He would live in the Imperial Palace on the Starborn homeworld. He would have access to the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy. He could help people across multiple star systems. He would be protected, honored, and granted a level of influence few could imagine. But he would also be leaving everything he knew. His simple life on Verdun 7 would be over. He would be thrust into galactic politics and intrigue. He would be watched constantly, judged by beings who saw humans as primitive and weak. Every action he took would reflect on Hana and potentially affect billions of lives. Taeyang sat down heavily. He thought about his small clinic, his quiet life. The choice he had made 3 years ago to step away from the chaos. He thought about the peace he had found here. Then he thought about Hana standing in his clinic asking questions about human values with genuine curiosity. He thought about her sad smile when she talked about duty. He thought about someone who commanded fleets and destroyed battle cruisers, who had spent centuries at war, reaching out for a chance to understand something different. He asked for one thing in return. He wanted Verdun 7 to remain independent. Protected, yes, but not controlled. The colonists had not asked to be part of this, and they deserved to continue their simple lives without interference. And he wanted the right to visit, to maintain his connection to this place. Hana agreed immediately. More than that, she smiled. Not a sad smile this time, but a genuine one. She said that she had hoped he would accept, that she needed someone who would remind her why she fought so hard to protect people in the first place. She extended her hand. Taeyang took it. Her skin was still that same cool, smooth texture he remembered from treating her injuries. But now he knew what that hand could do, the power it could unleash. And yet, in this moment, it was just a handshake between two people who had found an unexpected friendship. The next morning, Taeyang stood at the edge of the colony with a single bag containing his possessions. Minho was there, along with Administrator Somin and several other colonists. They had come to see him off, though none of them quite understood what was happening. Minho gripped his shoulder. He told Taeyang to be careful, to remember where he came from, to stay the person they knew. Taeyang promised he would try. A starborn shuttle waited, its ramp extended. Hana stood at the top, no longer wearing simple clothes but armor that marked her status. She looked regal and distant, every inch the Empress. But when she caught Taeyang's eye, she smiled slightly, and he saw his friend beneath all the ceremony. He walked up the ramp. The last thing he saw before the doors closed was Minho waving, and beyond him the small colony that had been his home. Then the shuttle lifted into the sky, carrying him toward a future he could never have imagined. The journey to the starborn homeworld took 6 days, even with their advanced, faster-than-light technology. Taeyang spent most of that time in his assigned quarters aboard the flagship, a massive vessel called the Eternal Dawn. His quarters were larger than his entire clinic had been, filled with luxuries he did not know how to use. Admiral Ji-won visited him on the second day. She sat across from him in the quarters' common area, studying him with those calculating eyes. She told him directly that she did not trust him, that in her experience people always wanted something, and those who claimed to want nothing were the most dangerous of all. Taeyang understood her suspicion. He told her that she was right to protect Hana, that someone in her position needed people who questioned everyone's motives. But he also told her that whether she believed him or not, he was here to help, not to manipulate or control. Ji-won was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said that Hana had changed during her time on Verdun 7. She had been softer somehow, more thoughtful. Ji-won was not sure if that was good or bad yet, but she warned Taeyang that if he ever hurt Hana, intentionally or not, there would be no place in the galaxy where he could hide. Taeyang believed her completely. He spent time learning about starborn culture from the ship's database. The starborn ascendancy controlled over 200 star systems and protected dozens more. They were the most powerful military force in known space, and that power came from individuals like Hana. The starborn were born with abilities that seemed impossible, abilities tied to something they called the source. They could manipulate energy, enhance their bodies, even fly through space without ships if they were strong enough. Hana was the strongest of all. She had been Empress for over 300 years, though she looked no older than 30 by human standards. She had fought in hundreds of battles, prevented countless wars, and held together an empire that might have collapsed without her strength. She was revered by her people, feared by her enemies, and utterly, completely alone. Until maybe now, Taeyang was given lessons in starborn etiquette and language. He learned that looking directly at someone of higher rank was considered aggressive, that turning your back on someone was a deadly insult, that there were 17 different forms of greeting depending on relative status, situation, and relationship. It was exhausting, and he knew he would make mistakes. On the 4th day, Hana invited him to dinner in her private quarters. It was the first time they had been alone since leaving Verdun 7. Her quarters were surprisingly simple for an Empress. There were windows showing the stars streaming past, comfortable furniture, and shelves with various objects that looked like personal treasures. They ate food that was both familiar and strange. Hana explained that the ship's food processors could create anything from thousands of different cultures. She had requested several Earth dishes, wanting to understand human cuisine better. They talked like they had in the clinic. Hana asked about Earth's history, about the different human cultures and their values. Taeyang asked about the starborn, about their society and beliefs. It felt natural, easy, like old friends catching up, but there was an undercurrent of sadness. Both of them knew that this was different from the clinic. There they had been equals or close enough. Here she was an Empress and he was a subject. The galaxy would always see them that way, and that changed things whether they wanted it to or not. Hana admitted that she was worried. She said that the Dominion incident had shown how vulnerable she was. If a random attack could nearly kill her, if she could be missing for weeks without her fleet finding her, then the ascendancy was more fragile than anyone knew. She had to be stronger, more vigilant. She could not afford any more mistakes. Taeyang listened. Then he reminded her of something they had discussed in the clinic. He told her that being strong did not mean being invulnerable, that sometimes admitting you needed help, accepting that you could not do everything alone, was the strongest choice of all. Hana looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. She said that her people would never accept that they needed to believe she was invincible, that the Empress was beyond the weaknesses of normal beings. Taeyang asked if maybe they needed to learn differently, if maybe showing them that even the strongest person could be vulnerable might make the ascendancy stronger, not weaker. It was a radical thought. Hana did not agree or disagree, but he could see her considering it. The starborn homeworld, called simply the Throne World, was beautiful beyond description. It orbited a binary star system, and its cities were built vertically, massive towers that reached into the sky. The architecture combined organic curves with geometric precision, creating structures that looked grown rather than built. The Eternal Dawn docked at the Imperial Palace, a structure so large it was visible from space. Taeyang followed Hana through corridors filled with guards, advisors, and officials. Everyone bowed as she passed. Everyone treated her with reverent respect. And everyone looked at Taeyang with barely concealed confusion and suspicion. He was given quarters in the palace, rooms that were even more luxurious than those on the ship. He was assigned guards, though it was not clear if they were protecting him or watching him. He was given access to the Imperial medical facilities, technology so advanced it made human medicine look like primitive healing herbs. But he was isolated. The other palace staff did not know how to talk to him. The Starborn advisors saw him as a curiosity at best, a potential threat at worst. Even the few other aliens in the palace, diplomats and specialists from various species, kept their distance. He was the human who somehow had the Empress's favor, and no one wanted to risk offending or befriending him until they understood what that meant. Hana was pulled into her duties immediately. There were border disputes to resolve, trade agreements to negotiate, military deployments to oversee. Taeyang saw her occasionally in passing, always surrounded by people, always wearing that mask of imperial authority. He felt useless. He had left his home, his life, to be here. But what was he actually doing? He was not treating patients. He was not advising anyone. He was just existing in a golden cage waiting for a purpose. 2 weeks after arriving, he found Hana in the palace gardens late at night. She was standing alone, looking up at the twin stars. She looked exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. Taeyang approached quietly. He asked if she was okay. She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. She said that being Empress meant you were never okay. You were just functional or not functional. Personal well-being was not relevant. They sat together on a bench. Taeyang told her that she had been right to worry, that he did not fit here, that he did not know how to help in this world of politics and power. Maybe bringing him here had been a mistake. Hana shook her head. She told him that having him here reminded her why she did this. All the meetings, all the decisions, all the battles, they were ultimately about protecting people. People like Taeyang and the colonists of Verdun 7. People who just wanted to live their lives in peace. If she forgot that, if she started seeing everything as just strategic calculations, she would become the monster her enemies claimed she was. She admitted that she did not know exactly what role he would play, but she knew she needed someone who saw her as Hana, not the Empress. Someone who would tell her the truth even when it was uncomfortable. Someone who represented the values she was fighting to protect. Taeyang considered this. He said that maybe his role was not to fit into the existing structure. Maybe his role was to challenge it, to ask questions that made people uncomfortable, to remind everyone that power should serve people, not the other way around. Hana smiled. She said that sounded dangerous. Taeyang agreed. But dangerous was not the same as wrong. The next day, Hana made an announcement. She declared that Taeyang was not just her personal physician. He was her cultural advisor for human relations. As humanity expanded further into the galaxy, there would be more contact between humans and the ascendancy. Taeyang would help bridge that gap, helping her understand human perspectives and values. More importantly, She established a new initiative. The Ascendancy would begin outreach programs to less advanced species, not to conquer or control them, but to understand them and help them develop. Medical missions, educational exchanges, technological aid given freely. It was unprecedented. It was radical. It was exactly the kind of thing that would challenge centuries of tradition. Admiral Jiwon was furious. She argued that it showed weakness, that other powers would see it as an opportunity to attack. But Hana was firm. She said that true strength was having the power to destroy but choosing instead to build, that the Ascendancy would be stronger if it was respected rather than just feared. The debate raged through the imperial court for days. But Hana was the Empress, and ultimately her word was law. The initiative would proceed. Months passed. Taiyang slowly found his place. He worked with Starborn officials to establish medical clinics on border worlds. He trained Starborn healers in human medical techniques and learned their advanced methods in return. He advised Hana on how humans thought, what they valued, how they saw the galaxy.